Agora, vamos começar o nosso momento internacional, um dos nossos momentos internacionais aqui no nosso 6º SIGPE, que é a nossa conferência, a primeira conferência internacional, nossa conferência de abertura, em que a conferencista será a professora doutora Veerle de Bosscher, que é referência internacional em gestão e políticas de esporte. Antes, gostaria de anunciar quem vai estar aqui mediando esse espaço, é o professor doutor Tiago Santos, que é da Universidade do Porto, que pode já estar se juntando aqui a nós, Tiago, no palco. Seja muito bem-vindo. E já para falar um pouco da professora de Bosscher, ela é professora no Departamento de Políticas e Gestão de Esporte da Vrije University Brussel, na Bélgica, e professora visitante na Universidade de Utrecht, na Holanda. Com doutorado premiado sobre fatores que levam ao sucesso esportivo internacional, o projeto SPLIS, ela coordena uma rede global de pesquisa que reúne mais de 15 países, incluindo o Brasil. Atualmente, é membro do Conselho da European Association of Sports Management e participa de comitês estratégicos de gestão esportiva em seu país. A partir desse momento, todos podem colocar seus fones de ouvido, porque nossa conferência será toda em língua inglesa e todos nós podemos acompanhar a partir da interação entre o professor Tiago e a professora Veerle com a nossa tradução simultânea.
Sorry, Professor. Yeah. No. Maybe it's on.
Let's just...
Okay.
It's better.
Buenas tardes. Yes. Good. So first of all, I would like to thank the Institute and Professor Mesadri for this wonderful invitation. I feel really honored to be here at this wonderful conference. I would also like to give my special thanks to Joao, who is over there, for his hospitality over the past days, and all the students. Caio, Zambonita is his nickname, and Gabriella, Amanda, special thanks, and Elo and Piana. They all have nicknames, so my name is not Veerle, it's also not de Bosscher, but my name is Vivi. Here in Curitiba, my name is Vivi. So, and I do like the coxina. It was very good to eat. So, yes, so thank you for inviting me here. During my presentation, it's a test if it works, okay. I will give my presentation in 2 sections. The first part will be general about SPLIS. Some of you know SPLIS, some of you might not know SPLIS. So some people might recognize some of the data. And in between that, I will organize a small movement section. Because we sit too much. No. Yeah, then it's fine. Good. You hear me better now? Good. Okay. I can't walk too far. Yes. And so then we will have a second section during this presentation. I like to walk around, so I don't want to be standing there. That's quite boring. But first let me provide you with some general context on the Olympic Games, context on what we know. I will not go too deep on that, but to give you some general ideas of what is happening internationally. And over time, during all the different Olympic Games, the IOC used quota because they wanted to have a more balanced way of dividing the medals among different nations. And somehow they succeeded in that. Originally, the top 20 nations, they won over 90% of all medals during the Olympic Games, whereas after the quota in 1992, these countries win over 70%, but still 70% of all medals is won by only 20 nations. Similarly, the top 10 nations, they win more than half of all the medals that can be won during Olympic Games, 1/3 on the top 5, and 1/4 of all medals is won just by 3 nations. Which means that there are less medals left for all the other nations. And thus it also means that the competition is very tough, has increased over time, we know that, and it is not so easy for smaller nations or for less wealthy nations to get into that competition. Now, we have made a Paris evaluation. On our website, you can find the full report on that evaluation. You can freely download the report. I will not go too deep into that. It will distract me too much away from my presentation of today. But on a general note, what I will show here in these slides is, compared to Tokyo, who are the nations who are actually the winners, who won more medals or more gold medals, and who are the nations who were maybe the losers. And this is the pictures of most nations that participated in Paris at the Olympic Games. So what we can basically see is that the absolute winners is France, of which we know won more gold medals, but also won 31 more medals in general. The gold medal winner was Korea, and the USA was the winner in the number of medals. When we look at the other side, we know that Brazil and Great Britain actually are doing quite well. Most nations, after hosting the Olympic Games, their success decreases a lot. If we look at Brazil, it was quite stable. Brazil lost 1 medal compared to the Tokyo Games and lost of them 4 gold medals, which was not too bad. But what we generally see on this picture is actually the winners are the future host of Olympic Games or the current host of Olympic Games, whereas maybe the losers could be the former host of the Olympic Games. Now, if we look at Brazil, and indeed I already mentioned the evolution of the number of medals, Brazil is a large country, maybe also a complicated country because of its size, because of the different states and confederations. But if we look at Brazil, 277 athletes have been sent to the Olympic Games in Paris. 20 of them won a medal. Brazil was ranked 20, with a population of 220, roughly a million inhabitants, and a wealth, as you can see there, in GDP per capita. If we would compare Brazil to any country in the world, I picked up the former Olympic host, and I picked up Japan. Japan has sent 430 athletes to the Olympic Games. They won 45 medals, so it's 1.5 times more athletes, 2 times more medals that they won, with a smaller population that is about half of Brazil, but Japan is more wealthy on a GDP per capita. It has more money, so it also indicates that the wealth of a country is a very important factor. I have added a third country to this slide, the Netherlands. The Netherlands has sent 258 athletes to the Olympic Games, pretty comparable to Brazil. They won 35 medals, so they won more medals. They were ranked 6. It was their highest ranking ever at the Olympic Games, with a population of less than 18 million people, and a wealth that is far above that of Brazil, again showing that the wealth of a country is a determining factor. Now, why am I saying all this? Because we did some statistical analysis, and I know Leandro Mazzi is in this room, and he will also give a presentation on this kind of data. But what we know from literature and from our own research is that
Success is determined already for 40% by the population, the wealth, and then former communist countries. They have an advantage. All the other factors like religion and so on were not significant in my analysis. Interesting to note is that 40% is a decrease. It used to be 50% in the past. So over the past Olympic Games, half of the success was determined by these factors, and there's nothing we can change about it. There's nothing we can do about it. This has decreased, which could also leave room for more space on factors that we may be able to influence over time. So we are interested not in that 40%, but in the rest, in the 60%. And maybe the culture of Brazil or the politics or the education system, for example, in the United States, are very determining factors in the success of nations. Those that we are interested in are the sports policy factors. What is the role that sports policy can really play in changing the success? Could Brazil have the ambition, you now won 20 medals, could you have the ambition within, let's say, 12 years, not to win 20 medals, but maybe 40? If I look at what is happening in Brazil now, in the different structures, the country has a lot of potential, much more than it already did now. Brazil is performing well, quite well, but they can even do better. So we are interested in how can sports policies contribute to that success of the nations. And what I will show here in this graph is a slide with the countries from our split slide study, the study that I said you can download from our website. And what we have done is a statistic analysis with these factors, population, wealth, and former communist countries. And what it shows, the numbers you see, is given 3 points for a gold medal, 2 points for a silver medal, 1 point for a bronze medal, and then you come at the total of the points here. This is the prediction. The statistic predict that based on these factors, this will be the results of the countries. However, in reality, we see this. In reality, we see that the actual medal points that are won by Great Britain, Japan, the Netherlands, Canada, New Zealand, and so on, and Brazil, it's higher than what we would expect based on the predictions. This is interesting. It's interesting to understand what is the reason why it is higher. And also Brazil is doing quite well there. So given the size of the country, the population, and the wealth, Brazil is doing quite well. So again, what is the reason why some of these countries are doing so much better? Who are the overachievers, the countries to the left side, and who are the underachievers? And what can we learn from the overachievers? As you can see, this sample of nations, it was a sample of nations who wanted to participate in our study. It's a free sample, and as you can see, we mainly have overachievers in this sample. I did a similar analysis on Paralympics, but not for Paris yet. This is based on Tokyo, but I just wanted to show it because we all know that Brazil is performing very well at the Paralympics, even much better. And as you can see, Brazil actually overperforms given its size and its wealth, which is, of course, something interesting as well. Another interesting slide, I find this one. You see here again these 17 nations of our sample, and in how many sports they have contested. So Brazil contested in 29 sports. We are interested in knowing in how many sports did the countries win medals. And if we add that too, we can see that Brazil won medals in 12 different sports, and that is a success rate of 51%. This success rate is not bad. So it means that the medals are also invested quite broadly. If I look to my own country, you see Belgium there, we only have a success rate of 90%. So that 41% is quite interesting. But I am not interested in the countries below me. I'm ambitious and I'm interested in the countries above me. So I would like to know why the UK has 70% success rate, or Canada, or Japan, or the countries that you can see there. This is just a side note and some general context that I wanted to give you about the past Olympic Games in Paris. And I will tell you something more of how do we measure sports policy and how do we evaluate it. I might sound very academic if I want to show you first something about the methods. I have to. I can't show you SPLIS results without explaining what is behind it. So I will try to run through that quickly. And the key question of what we are interested in is the why. Why are some countries more successful than other countries? And what is the role of sports policy? What do we mean by an efficient sports policy? And what are the characteristics of countries that do well? Is their sports policies more efficiently organized? So we did an international study in 9 pillars, a very broad study years ago, where we compared 15 countries on different sports policy factors. There are 4 key points at the basis of what we do. The first is the theoretical model that we use, and I know that some academics also in Brazil use this SPLIS model. This SPLIS model consists of 9 pillars and approximately 100 critical success factors. What we basically do is, how much money do countries invest in elite sport, and how do they invest that money in elite sport? What is the relationship with the number of medals that these countries win? I just want to mention that we do not only look at medals, we also looked at top 8 places and also at world championships and other international championships. And how is that money actually invested into that system? So this 9-pillar model basically looks like this. I will quickly run through that. The first pillar is the financial support, the inputs of an elite sports system. The second pillar is the organization and structure of the elite sports system. Is there an integrated approach with which elite sport is looked at? The third pillar is we assume that having a broad sports participation basis will help to improve the success on the longer term. Once athletes start to practice more, are specializing into one sport, there is the talent identification and talent development system, and then the athletic career and support that athletes received and post-athletic career support. And then there are 4 other pillars we are looking at: training facilities, coaches provision, and coach development, national and international competition, and scientific research and innovation and sports science support. And then the environment of elite sport is something that we cannot really measure because of the complexity it would give to this model. Just to give you this basis, those are the 9 pillars. We do not only measure or evaluate pillars, but for each pillar we have critical success factor, and for each critical success factor we have a number of sub-factors. So in total, this study measures around 750 elements in the 15 countries of our sample. The second characteristic of our methodology is we use mixed methods, and we involve the athletes, the coaches, and the performance directors in our evaluation system. No other study on elite sport evaluations did that so far. So we try to combine these both measurements. So we try to measure to understand. So what basically happens is we have our model, we have our critical success factors and sub-factors. We have surveys. These are quantitative, evaluated by athletes, coaches, and performance directors, and that gives some outcome on certain criteria. We also have the inventory. It's mainly qualitative, so it's a lot of data on around 212 questions where we go into depth on each pillar. And then we input this into a scoring system that we have developed in a scientific way, and we try to help to let that scoring system guide us in the interpretation of results. So it's not all about the scoring system, but it helps us to analyze more than 3,000 data points that we have and to give an interpretation to them. And for presentations such as this, I use the quantitative views because it helps you to give a one-moment overview of what we do. And then the final key point, I find that the most important one, is that we always collaborate with local researchers. So whatever I tell you today, it's not my work, but it's the work of a number of people, local researchers, policy organizations that were involved in this study. You see below the SPLIS Consortium group from 4 countries, the different countries, and then on top, our SPLIS partner is Leandro Mazzi and his former tutor, Maria Teresa Terboom. Okay, as said, I would split my presentation in 2 parts. So I will first start with going through some basic results. The basic question we want to ask here is, first of all, do these pillars say something about success? Do systems work? And second, I will show the radar graph or the overview of Brazil compared to other nations in these slides. So the first question is, do systems work? And we are academics and we want to analyze things, so we will use regression analysis or correlation analysis. As we only have a sample of 50 nations, we look at a Spearman's rank correlation to see, is there a relationship between these pillars and success? And there is. On 6 pillars of the 9, we can see that the higher the scores on the pillar, the better the success of the country. This is interesting because it shows that structure and policies around these 9 pillars are important. What is also interesting is that we do not find a significant correlation on these pillars that you see here in red. Pillar 5, there is at least a relationship. 0.5 means that there is a tendency when nations score better on the support that they provide for athletes, that they will also perform better. The reason why this pillar is not significant is because it's the pillar where almost all nations had good scores, and then you cannot find statistical relationships. I will further in my presentation go a bit deeper on these other 2 pillars, participation and talent identification, because we still believe that they are very important to develop elite sports system. And maybe we did not measure them in the good way. So I will come to that later in the presentation. Let's have a look at the results on the 9 pillars. I will show you on this radar graph, you can see the 9 pillars. In the very middle, the dot line in the very middle shows the average of the country, and the other dotted line is the maximum score of one of the countries. So when I plot Brazil against these averages of the 15 countries, Brazil at that time was there. So what does it actually say? It shows that Brazil has a quite high financial support for elite sport, and there are several pillars also in national and international competition. We know that Brazil has organized a number of international competition and is quite good in bidding for large international events, which also give exposure to the country. But as you can see, Brazil underscores on almost every other pillar. And that gives us information on what should we do with that. How should we look at Brazil in these 9 pillars? The book that you saw on one of the earlier slides gives details on the content of each pillar and how Brazil does against all these pillars. I cannot go too much into depth, but the radar graph gives us a general overview. It scores below the average of other nations, which means there is room for development. And actually, I would be afraid within 12 years to see Brazil competing and taking more medals away from other nations, because I really think that will happen if I look at what is happening in the country now. I add to the slide Japan, the countries that I showed earlier, with 125 million inhabitants. Well, Japan, they score well above the average in all the pillars, except one. Except this pillar 3, sport participation, and for talent development, they are around the average. But they do well in all the other pillars, so we can understand that there is a difference between what countries do. When I add the Netherlands to this slide, you see a totally different overview. The Netherlands does particularly well in sport structures and organization, in participation, in talent development, and the support that athletes receive. So there are different pillars where this country is good in. And that's probably understandable. The Netherlands is a much smaller country than Japan or than Brazil. So it's quite easy, or at least easier, to organize talent identification systems, talent development, and also grassroots sports participation. I have also added France to that as the host of the Olympic Games. Also for France, you can see that they generally score above the average of most nations, except for the organization and structure. They meanwhile changed a few things in France, but there was a lot of room for improvement regarding the national coordination of elite sports policies in France, which they have improved up to the past Olympic Games in Paris. And I say but. And the reason I say but is, I will now show which country had the maximum score on each pillar. I would expect that we can find a country that does well on all pillars. They aren't. Every country has an underperformance somewhere. So there is no country that performs best or very well at all pillars. And if we simply look at who has the maximum scores, South Korea has the highest investment, the Netherlands the best structure, Denmark the best participation. My country is best developed in talent development and talent identification together with Switzerland. Athletic and post-athletic support, it's again the Netherlands. The best training facilities were in Japan. Canada had the best coach development system. International competition was best developed in Japan again, and then scientific research in Australia. So it's interesting also to know that there is not one country that is the best in everything. We can generally look at how do successful winter sports nations or summer sports nations, I have already showed the summer sports nations, how do they generally do? But what we can basically learn is, if you ask me, give me a blueprint of what nations need to do within elite sport, we can't. All we can do is look at critical success factors and how do they relate with success. But there is not a blueprint, and especially elite sport is embedded in a general system of a country, in a general culture, in a tradition of in which sports countries are successful, that these factors barely influence the elite sport success of countries much more. So we must be prudent with looking at a blueprint or a copy of other countries. Okay, we are 25 minutes in my presentation, and what I actually do with students is we have learned that when people listen during a half an hour to a presenter, that concentration will diminish. So in order to help you a bit in finding that concentration back, I have provided a small movement section. And I hope that you are prepared to help me in that, otherwise I will have a bit face here. I don't think, stretch your legs, and I will ask you in a while to stand up, but it doesn't go to the next slide. And I think it should start. What? Yeah, okay. Yeah. I will stop it a little bit earlier because it's 8 minutes. I will stop after 5 minutes. But I would say relax and try to stretch your legs and do as you are told.
Hey everybody, my name is Chris Page and I'm going to be your instructor for the next few minutes. everybody, my name is Chris Page and I'm going to be your instructor for the next few moments to help refresh your body. These movements are all about getting yourself back into some better concentration, using some stretches and some exercise to strengthen your muscles too. If you do feel pain or something doesn't work for you, then just stop. You don't have to do everything. But I do want you to at least try in case we can work some strength back into some weaker parts of your body. So if you've been sitting behind your desk for a while, let's get up and start moving and start getting back some good concentration and energy for the rest of your day.
I developed this moving during COVID, so.
All right, I think we're ready to start our first series of movement, but before we do anything, let's just check our position. I want your legs to be open in this first part. You'll spread the weight evenly on each side so you feel balanced and strong just from standing in this position. And then take a look. We're going to lift the arms and then reach out to the side, press and extend as far as you can. And then look, we're going to push the hips back, arms forward, lower, and then lift all the way back to a standing position. Can you do it all again? So a little sequence here to move the arms, breathe in, breathe out. And press to extend to the side, lots of space. Hips behind you, arms to the front. And then lower and lift. Remember that, we're going to do it again later. Now have a look at this. Can you try a little squat for me? Our first exercise to stimulate your leg muscles today. Relax your shoulders, lift up your chest, and let's feel proud. We're starting a sequence that's going to help our body get concentration and energy back. We're going to feel better, be able to work more efficiently just from this series of movement to stimulate. Now, we're lowering the body, but we're keeping the posture. Try to maintain and stay lifted with your chest and head. Now let's add on a little pulse. Have a look. 7 little pulses. You're staying lower now. You're not going all the way back until we finish. And then look, stand up. And let's try it again. The arms in front help us just to counterbalance the weight of the body. Can you do it higher? Watch the difference. So the arms higher, but still into that lower position with your legs. You should feel the difference. Try again. Arms up. And pulsing down, but still keeping the posture. Well done. Take a look at this. I want you to cross and hold. No pulse this time. Then take the arms up and hold 2. Can you feel your legs? They're working. Cross. And then slowly to stand up. Well done. Let's take a little stretch. Hold on to one leg. Quadriceps here. Can you feel your balance? Working the balance also helps us to control the body better. We're going to see a few times today. I'm going to get you to stimulate and work your balance in an exercise or stretch. All right, check this out. This leg goes behind you, and then we're going to tap and switch sides. This is called walking lunge. We're going to simulate walking and using the leg muscles, but we're going to keep the posture lifted up. Look at my chest. We're staying in the air. Try not to lean forwards and look down. Look in front, and we'll keep a good posture in the upper body. Really get all the work into your leg muscles, and that's what we want, the focus to stay in your legs. All right, should we incorporate the arms too? How about some coordination? Arms coming up. I know it's more than one thing to do. At the same time, you're going to have to concentrate. The arm coming up and the body going down. The stimulation of coordination. Well done. Take a look. Hold position. Bring the leg up to the chest and press closer. And then change side. Press into your chest. This is for your hips. And then put this leg behind you and watch. We're going to stay on this side of your body. A little drop down, but keeping your balance and posture. And you'll notice the longer we stay on one side, the more intense that muscle is going to work. Can we do the other side too? Let's try. Change. Down, up. Breathe in, exhale. But still keeping your posture lifted. I want your back to stay straighter. So maintain this control of your upper body too. change side. Let's do 4. 4, breathe in and out. 3, back and chest straight. 2, 1, change side. 4. Lots of work on one side of your body. All right, change sides and stay there. Hold the position. And just like we did in the first exercise, we're going to keep that control over the posture. Then change side, hold and control. Try not to move. Stay in position. Brilliant. Separate your legs. Give them a little shake. And then let's do our first movement. Remember we did it earlier.
Okay. It's you who should be applauded, because it was really nice to see the whole room doing this so well. So thank you. Yeah. And I have a bit warm of it, so I left my jacket there. Okay, we come to the second part, and I will run with you through the pillars and hopefully also give you some information that might be useful for Brazil. So I will run through the funding of countries, what we call efficient nations and why, the organization and structure, sports participation, talent identification, some conclusions and some food for thought. Okay, thank you. So, yeah, you can put it here, thank you. I'm a bit thirsty, sorry. So, what does it take at the question of how much money does it take, or how much money do countries invest? And if we would compare Brazil to other countries, how would they actually do? Brazil is one of the countries that participated in our last 3 SPLIS studies. We have 2 light studies, only focusing on this pillar 1 or finance, and then the full comprehensive study on the 9 pillars where I showed the rudder graphs on. So here you get an overview of the 2023 funding data of the different country. You can see the position of Brazil. I will talk in euros, 155 million euros, but above that you can find how much this would be million Brazilian real. We know also in Brazil that there are state companies financing sports and elite athletes, but we do not include that in our data, because what we look at in the comparisons is what funding can be or should be able to be coordinated. So where is there some control over what happens with this funding? I think it's interesting to see where Brazil is compared to other countries, but look at the left side there. Poland and Hungary, a country of 38 million inhabitants, and then Hungary 10 million inhabitants. How much funding they invest on a yearly basis in 1 year. It's amazing. And they are not at all successful. So there are countries that are really investing a lot of money in a way that it's not being invested efficiently. If we look at the evolution of Brazil over time, and I would like to thank Leandro Mazzi because he collaborated on the data collection for us. And you can see that it fluctuated over time. It decreased after 2014, which was obviously the period of the World Cup football. Funding also decreased after Rio, but then we can see some fluctuations over time. And I think that Brazil is not doing too bad with the amount of funding that is being invested. Now, the key questions we want to ask is, does money in lead to medals out? We already know the answer because we have seen that it was significantly correlated, and that correlation is lower in Paris than it was in our previous games, but that is related to the fact that the funding of Hungary and Poland are so high, so don't pay too much attention to that. But on that line would be the prediction of the 17 nations that are involved in this study. What we can learn from this is that Brazil is quite much on the line. Given the funding it has, it performs well. It's on the line. So we can say Brazil cannot have the ambition to have 40 medals within 12 years. I think they could. What we are interested in is understanding why is Great Britain, the Netherlands, here also Spain, so much above the line. They are doing better than what their funding would tell us. And why are these countries under the line in the Paris Olympic Games? Also even Switzerland, who underperformed in the Paris Olympic Games compared also to the previous games. So we would say that the countries above the line are the efficient nations and under the line are the least efficient nations of our sample. We did the same with the study with the 15 countries, which was way longer ago, but I still show it because our data further in the slides relate to these countries. So again here we saw in the countries and the prediction towards Rio that we can see which countries are above the line and which countries are under the line. And I'm going to ask you to remember the following countries. Those: France, but mainly Japan, Australia and the Netherlands. Remember these countries. I will come back to them in one of the next slides. We did the same analysis for winter sports. And here, remember Canada, the Netherlands and also Switzerland, who is performing very well still in a winter sport. Why do I ask you to remember these countries? Because we want to look at who are the countries who now do well in the organization and structure of their elite sports policies. Those were the general scores of these nations. And look what the top 5 nations are. The Netherlands, Australia, Japan, Canada, Switzerland were exactly those nations that performed better than what could be predicted based on the investments that they make in their elite sports system. It simply means they do something more with their money than we do. It's interesting to understand why. So I will go a bit deeper on the why question. And what have we measured under that pillar 2 of organization and structure? We see that the most successful countries at the Olympic Games of our sample, they all have a very strong coordination, mainly by only one organization coordinating the elite sports system. They have very clear task descriptions and the delineation of their roles of the different entities in the system. They also have full-time staff at the National Sport Association responsible for the development of elite sport. NSA, or National Sport Association, is different for each country. In some countries that can be the ministry, in other countries it can be the Olympic Committee, in other countries it can be merged of these both parties. Like for example in the Netherlands, the National Sports Confederation and the Olympic Committee are merged into one organization, which is even better. So those are characteristics of these successful nations. What does coordination actually mean? Coordination does not mean that countries or entities or sport organizations should lose their autonomy. It first of all means that we need to record. We need to understand who does what in the elite sports system as it currently is. Is there an overlap of tasks or not? And who plays which role? How can we improve that? We need to define common goals. I think it needs to start with the Ministry of Sport that needs to develop a strategic plan, a policy plan with common goals, and probably do that in collaboration. In Brazil it would be the Olympic Committee for elite sport. For grassroots sport it might be in a different way. So for each goal there might be different types of responsibilities. When you define a goal, you need to analyze for each goal differently who are the organizations who will reach these goals and in what way will they have to reach these goals. It's also about connection. Creating coordination is a difficult task for any country. It's about things that happen here in the conference. It's about connecting people, it's about discussing, and it's mostly about mutual understanding. Understanding what they do in this federation or in another federation, in this region, at the state level, and so on. But it definitely means that from a national level in elite sport to a top-down level, you need to define who does what. And it's about creating synergy among the different entities. So autonomy should be respected. but there should also be a common willingness to find the common goals and to strive and to find the good strategy and actions that need to be done to reach those common goals. Decentralized networks are necessary. You need them. This is where the sport grows. This is where the connection happens on a local level, on a decentralized level. But that does not mean you should not have a coordinated policy. This means that these local levels of, in this case, in Brazil Federation, they should also know what the main goals are of the national ministry, Olympic Committee, national federations, and so on. So collaboration on common goals is the key point of any coordination, and that is what all these countries do well. And I have given here an example of my own country. I live in a small country, 10 million inhabitants, in no way comparable to Brazil, but still it is also a complicated country. In Flanders, we have in Belgium, we have the Dutch-speaking region that has another language than the southern part, the French-speaking region, and we also have a German part, German-speaking part. Above that, we do not have a national ministry of sport. We only have Ministry of Flanders, Ministry of Wallonia. But it also means that these regional ministries, they cannot fund a national organization. So Germany, for example, also has a federalized system, but there exist national entities. In Belgium, they do not exist, except from the Olympic Committee, because they have to select the athletes, but they cannot receive funding from the ministries. So it makes it complicated because the NOC doesn't have much money, but they do the final selection. So at a certain time, before 2004, there was in the newspapers, Flanders, the northern part, we treat it as a different country, that they look like a dragon with 12 heads. There are 12 different entities doing something in elite sport in that small region of 6 million inhabitants, and there is no coordination at all. At that time, we did not have a policy plan. I was making my PhD during these years, and I was comparing with the Netherlands. The Netherlands at that time had already developed 20 policy plans over time on elite sport. Our first was only in 2004. So we were not good in long-term planning. So at that time, there was the Ministry, Culture, Sport and Media. For Top Sport Flanders, the organizations could ask funding for events. BLOZO was our national sports administration at that time. There was the umbrella of the federations. The athletes received wages from the Ministry of Employment, from another ministry. There was an anti-doping commission, that's a bit different. There was funding towards former coaches who did something well and who convinced the ministry we should have an institute of elite sport. Another said we should have an academy on elite sport, and so on. So all these different organizations, they all received funding to do something for elite sport. In addition, at the federal, the national level, we have the Olympic Committee and also the lotteries that are at the national level. They have a different role as they have in Brazil. The funding from the lottery is maybe 5 million euros, so it's kept to a minimum, except from the lottery does fund some cycling teams and some specific projects they are interested in. And we policymakers do not have an influence on that. So it's a mess. And the point was that one athlete or one federation could receive funding from all these different organizations. And no one knew how much funding does that athlete at the end receive, what kinds of support services does that athlete at the end receive, and the same for all the federations. So in 2004, the policy plan was developed, and as the funding comes from the ministry, it was the National Sport Association. The name was BLOZO before, now it's called Sport Flanders. But so the funding goes to the Sport Flanders. But we need the Olympic Committee and we need the federations to develop our elite sports policy. So there was a lot of struggles. We were jealous of the Netherlands, who have only one entity deciding on everything together with the ministry. So Sport Flanders is responsible for the complete pyramid on elite sport. This is the umbrella of all the Flemish federations. So it's a kind of one umbrella organization that is the in-between between the federations and the ministry or the National Sport Association, and they also receive funding. The Olympic Committee, they take care of the top of the pyramid. As I said, they don't have funding, they still don't have much funding. They do a few small projects, they do very good things, but all within a limited amount of funding and only for those athletes that are already reaching that top level. And what they installed in 2004 is a task force. All decisions on elite sport are taken in the task force. They meet once a month. Sport Flanders is preparing these meetings, and once a month they discuss which athletes will have the grant, how much that grant will be, for what performances, for federations, what are they lacking, what are the programs that are running well, what are the programs that are not running well. So they do a monthly evaluation of everything in elite sport in a meeting that is called the task force. And that's how collaboration started. It's also where success has started to improve in Flanders. I give the example of Lotte Kopecky, who is a world athlete in cycling, female athlete. She always received the grant from Sport Flanders because female cycling, the cyclist did not earn so much as the male cyclist and so on. But now that she has become successful, Sport Flanders determines how much funding does Lotte Kopecky receive from sponsorship, from prize money, and from other sources. And they say, on top of the wage from Sport Flanders, which is a good wage, monthly wage for training on a full-time basis, on top of them, the athletes can only earn maximum 25% through prize money and sponsorship. Lotte Kopecky earns more, so 3 months ago, they decided not to fund her anymore from the ministry or Sport Flanders. She's not happy with that, but she understands, because that means more money for other athletes. In addition, there is also a steering committee. I am a member of that steering committee in Flanders that are external experts and universities. It's a group of, I think, 12 people. And we meet like 4 times a year to discuss the plans that are being handled by the task force in elite sport. Is this comparable to Brazil? Of course, it's not. The point I want to make is it's all about getting things coordinating, about meeting, and not meeting now and then, but on a regular basis, and determine who does what in elite sport. I have taken also an example of Germany, because I think somehow there is some comparability between Brazil and Germany. Germany, there is the federal minister of sport, but they also have the different state levels, and that's why I think they are interesting for Brazil. In Germany, there has been merging of the Olympic Committee and the Sports Confederation. I think this is an important step forwards in improving the elite sports policy or the general sports policy in Germany. There are 66 national sport federations, and they have a conference of ministers who regularly meet with the ministers from different states. So there are 16 different states. In Brazil there are 27, there are more, but there are 16 ministries at regional level, and they often do not delineate with the national level as well. So similar problems exist here, although I'm pretty sure that the coordination is much better developed, and I think for Brazil it would be interesting to talk with Germany and learn from how they have installed such systems. And Brazil has a lot of municipalities, 5,500 or something, but Germany has 10,700. I was astonished about that. So at least there is some comparability in the complexity between Germany and Brazil. I have added this slide because you have already seen some of what is happening in Brazil now. And I was really impressed by what I've seen yesterday from the information system that is being developed here by the Institute. The amount of data that is in there is amazing. This is a luxury position for every policymaker who is in this room, because it's freely accessible for everyone. If you want to create a policy plan, It starts with understanding what is happening in your federation or in your region or whatever. It's about understanding the data. And once you understand the data, you can develop your policy goals. I think not many countries have developed this at such a level as I have seen it here in Brazil. So I think it will be promising for the future of Brazil to continue with that. What else is this pillar 2 about? It's about the role of the federations, namely at the National Sport Association, there are people that guide the federations in becoming better. So in the good performing countries, they have performance directors that help the athletics federation, the swimming federation. They learn from each other also. They gather all the expertise and they share it at the federation level because they want their federations to be stronger. I often hear in Flanders, these federations, they are not good enough. Well, the solution to that is help them to become better and try to collaborate and understand what is happening within the federations. They are accountable for, in these countries, in the good performing countries, they are accountable for their success and for what they do. All these countries also have a long-term strategy, good governance network. They involve stakeholders in their evaluation. Don't forget, it's not about policy plans and strategy. It's also about evaluating where you are in your policy plan. And then target the resources very specifically to those sports where you believe you can be successful in. So, for example, the Netherlands or Flanders, take Flanders. We have the focus, because our budget is small, our country is small, there is a focus on Olympic sports only. Only 4% of the overall budget can go to non-Olympic sports, and 96% is divided only over Olympic sports. It's a decision. I'm not saying whether it's good or not, but it's a decision when the budget is limited to target it very specifically, because you can't give many people a little bit, you need to orient it and make elite sport programs stronger. Long-term planning is about the following. It's about having the same goals at every level in the country, at least 8 years in advance. What it actually means is, let's take Brazil as a case, that Brazil needs to define who are our athletes who are currently performing or have the ability to perform in Los Angeles at the next Olympic Games. Who are these athletes? Most countries, or many countries, use the top 8 as a goal. I think Brazil uses top 20 as a goal. Canada uses top 16. But for example, the UK, the Netherlands, Flanders, France, they use the top 8 as the goal of when will we support athletes when they can reach the top 8. This is moment T in time. You also need to define your potentials, T minus 4. So try to estimate already now, before Los Angeles, and we go 4 years back in time, who are the athletes who have the potential possibly to perform. It's difficult because the sample is much broader and you don't want to lose any talents. That's true. It's much more difficult, and it's the role of the federations to handle this and to try to be as precise as possible in that. And even T minus 8, who are our emerging talents? It starts with recording what every country has. There are also the sporting hopefuls and the grassroots sports participation. And the reason we say so is because many characteristics are best developed at younger ages. So we must make sure that also in the sports clubs they are working well. Not only within the competition, but also within the recreational sports, sports should be developed in a good way. So who needs to define all this? It's the Olympic Committee, it's the ministry, but it's also all the federations, from a national level to a regional level, to the local level, to the clubs. We need to know what the goals are at each level. We need to understand which athletes we have in each level. That is what good performing countries are doing, and where we also try to learn with our own country from this. Interestingly, however, that broad sports participation basis, we could question how should this pyramid be developed? Should we focus in a narrow way or should we focus in a broad way? Should we develop grassroots sport participation? I think this is a key issue for Brazil, to also develop the grassroots, simply to later develop more potential talents. It's not just about competition, it's also about making children do sports and practice sports. Should we develop a smaller pyramid at a certain time, more focused, or should we identify our talents through the school system, for example? Those are all questions we need to pose, but it's at least sport specific. So it's up to federations to determine what should happen at each level. Now in SPLIS we measured children have the opportunities to participate in sports at school during physical education or extracurricular activities. There is a high general participation rate, and there is a national policy towards promoting the quality of sports clubs. Actually, we did not find any significant correlation. Does that mean that this pillar is not important? We don't believe it. I cannot accept it. We have a PhD currently running on this topic. But the main reason is that, first of all, our sample only has developed nations, quite developed nations with at least some degree of participation. But most of all, it takes 10 to 15 years to develop a whole career, and it's probably not realistic to make these kind of relationships. So there are so many other factors that will influence the success. So it's a very complex relationship to investigate, and we believe that on the longer term you need a broad participation base because of the continuous supply of young talents. But there is another reason. And the other reason is, in such an example, there are many other probably better graphs of that. The point I want to make is that there are so many skills that need to be developed before the age of 12. Not only for grassroots, but also for talent development and later elite athletes. Some skills are best trainable before the age of 12. So there are good reasons also to take care that at the grassroots level, sport is well developed and of a high quality. We have developed a model of quality of sports clubs. Because of the time, I have skipped it, but if people would be interested, you can ask me, because we can give you the whole scale that is behind it. On talent identification and development, I will not go too much into depth because I already said many things. But the key point here is also the reason why it did not correlate well. As you can see, there are mainly the smaller countries that did well on this pillar. And so the smaller countries that can better organize on talent identification and talent development, those are not necessarily the best performing countries in elite sport. What it is about in elite sport is about talent pathways. You probably have all heard about the long-term athlete development pathway, or the FTEM model. We in SPLIS, we look at systems, but there is also an athlete overview or an athlete development perspective, which looks at the foundation that is combinable with the grassroots level at the SPLIS model, the talent phases, and then the elite and the mastery phases. I don't know if you know that model, but I want to tell you something about the model. So what that model actually does is, at each level, you determine, also in sports clubs, what are the characteristics of each level. If you search on FTEM, you will find that information. What is needed on each level of talent development, of the foundation, which is about lifelong sports participation and active for life. What is needed on the level of the different levels of talent, and what is needed on the different level of elite and mastery. Well, who should develop that? I would assume that every federation has developed this for their own sport. What are the characteristics of the foundation level in my sport? At what age do we think we need to identify talents, where and how? So there is a role for the national federations in that, to develop the high performance pathway that only starts once talents are being developed. And I want to show you some examples of other countries who use FTEM within their federations. This is an example of Australia, Snow Sport Australia, and how they use the different phases, and they define for each phase how how young children will train, in what circumstances, at the foundation level, at what age they should start to specialize into one sport, how many hours they should train once they are being developed that talent, and so on. So all these different blocks are developed in Australia in the different sports. Similarly, also Japan uses this model to define within a sport how the sport should be developed. Example of Switzerland, example of Ireland, example of the United Kingdom. Within a sport, this is fencing. And I want to show the example of Switzerland because the question could be, is this the role of the federation? Yes, it is. But what here does coordination mean? Well, to me, coordination means that if the ministry or the Olympic Committee are funding federations, they could ask a return for that. And that return could, for example, be, and that is what's happening in Switzerland, they need to develop their own long-term athlete development plan. So in Switzerland, every federation has developed this long-term athlete development plan using the FTEM model. For swimming, as you see, you can find them on their website actually, so you can also learn from how other countries developed this in sport. All right, this was a lot of information, right? I want to round off with some conclusion and some final thought of final food for thought, and hopefully you can still ask some questions after that. To summarize, I said that there does not exist a generic blueprint of what an elite sport policy should be. No one can say to Brazil how elite sport policy should be developed and how grassroots sport should be developed. It are two different lines, but they need to find a synergy as well. What is important is try to learn from what happens in other countries. You cannot copy the system. You cannot copy the system from Germany. You cannot copy what I just came to tell about my own country. But what you can learn is the principles. The principle of Flanders was that you create an entity where the different organizations will meet on a frequent basis, which was every month, and where they discuss the policy goals and so on. That's a principle. It's not a copy of a system. So that is what we call bench learning instead of benchmarking. Was there a relationship between money and success? Yes, there was. But what I found most interesting here is that the efficiency of nations is determined by their organization and structure. It means that the organization and structure within Brazil can help to move the country forward. The first step, I said, was record what there is. You have a great database as a starting point to record what there is. Now it's a matter of using it and using it in the right way. We also learned that these are the significant pillars, and if you want to have short-term success while investing in finance, facilities, coaches, competition, might deliver success within the next 4 years. But especially those pillars, research and organization and structure, they need time. Accept it. Accept that you cannot change the system in Brazil in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. It might take 10 years before you finally are where you want to be. Maybe, but it's a step that you need to take, one step at a time. And maybe by discussing the goals and the different steps, you will reach consensus. And today I heard from a German colleague that if you then reach consensus, that consensus might be over better quality. So it's a matter of giving it a time, but not letting it go, and trying to connect with all the different organizations. I have explained about Pillar 5. I want to end with some food for thought. I have started with showing the pillar model, inputs, throughputs, outputs. Actually, what many nations are looking at is not just winning medals, but asking the question, why does Brazil want to win medals? If I give Brazil the ambition to have 40 medals within 12 years, why would that be beneficial for Brazil? Why would you do that? The why question has become a key point in policy plans of many nations. So, to what extent can we expect that elite sport, it's taxpayers' money? If the Ministry of Sports invests in elite sport, it's your money. It's taxpayers' money. So it's acceptable to take elite sport policy for granted to also give a return towards the society. So we have within SPLIS developed a model, the MESSI model, and it's based on 342 studies, empirical studies, that have tried to analyze what are the benefits or what is the return on investment that elite sport can deliver. Elite sport is not only positive, it has a lot of negative elements as well. There is corruption in elite sport, there is fraudulence, there is gambling, there is pressure, there are injuries, and so on and so on. So those are the ones that came out of this literature analysis. There are also the positive elements where elite sport can benefit from. And we have clustered these into 10 dimensions. So you can see here the social inclusion, collective identity, ethics and fair play, happiness, fans and media, international and political power, athlete quality of life, sport participation and inspiration, economic development, and local environment. This MESSI model comes with a scale. We have a scale developed on each of these items, and it's freely available through our website. But countries like Belgium, the Netherlands, the UK have used the MESSI model to understand the public value of elite sport. And we did an international study in Europe among 7 nations, and we asked to the population in these nations, what does elite sport mean for you? For example, 71% of the Europeans think that elite sport makes them proud of their country. Elite sports make the European happy. These are interesting data also for ministries to argue and to legitimize why you want to invest in an elite sport system. In Paralympics, the figures are usually higher than for Olympics as well. And why do we do that? Because we believe that elite athletes can be role models to society. What does a role model actually mean? There are several definitions, but it could be an athlete who motivates, inspires, demonstrates exemplary behavior on and off the sporting field and is therefore considered worthy of imitation. When we ask people, do you have a role model? And then if you have a role model, do you believe that athletes can be role models for youth? 77% of the European population think they can. They can inspire participation, they can create a positive international image. So it's worth knowing what we can do with our athletes as role models. And as a consequence of that, many countries have developed their policy plans accordingly. If we look at the policy plan of the Netherlands, you will not only find how they want to develop medals, you will for sure find how they want to create or use the power of elite sport and their athletes as role models to return to society. They make contracts, they make agreements with their athletes on the medal winners and all those who receive grants and support, what they should do in a return in relation to grassroots sport, in relation to going to schools, to going to suburbs, to going to vulnerable youth and try to motivate them to practice sports. It's part of their contract. Similarly, also in the UK, this is the title of their plan, Empowering Positive Change and Social Impact. So at this time, it's not only about winning medals anymore, but it's about winning medals well. I thank you for your attention. Good. Yeah. Good. Yeah. I'm going to drink a bit.
Okay. So thank you so much for your speech, Dr. Bosscher. Agora nós vamos abrir um pequeno espaço para perguntas. Nós temos aqui, né, um período de tempo muito curto para até terminar essa conferência, mas nós já começamos a receber algumas perguntas e eu vou fazê-las em português, depois tento fazer aqui uma tradução, or I will translate the question for you. Okay? Sim?
Sim.
I love you speech boa tarde. It's really nice. Or Caio Zanbiri from The first question it's about here é sobre como é que os gestores locais podem potenciar a sua gestão a partir dos resultados de estudos que trazem a lógica da elite desportiva, né? E essencialmente nós temos aqui uma parcela de gestores locais e como é que eles podem utilizar esses resultados para melhorar a sua gestão local e do desporto local. In your opinion, how the local managers could help to improve the sport national development based on SPLIS results?
Is the question how they used the SPLIS results to improve the management of their... a lot, I think. I'm going to give an example. Switzerland made a presentation a few years ago why SPLIS was relevant for Switzerland. And so they really use, Switzerland is already evaluating SPLIS the third time now, so they are really using the results of the detailed critical success factors to see where are we good in, but where can we improve, and then to learn how can we learn from other countries to improve on particular critical success factors. So I think it has been helpful in many countries to improve their elite sport system. Also in the Netherlands, SPLIS has really been used over the past 15 years to improve their system. Possibly they have now come at a point that they think we know it all now. We need to make the next step. So we have the ambition also to work on the 9 pillars with experts from the different countries and to further improve them to higher levels so that still the UK and the Netherlands and good performing countries can improve their system using the pillars. But it's a dynamic model. It's not a one model in time. It will change over time, and within 5 years it might look differently from what it looked. One example, how do you use artificial intelligence in elite sport? It's not yet included in our model, but I'm sure it should be included in the future. So all those kind of questions need to be updated, and it's dynamic.
You respond to the next question, because the question is about the change of the SPLIS model the first time and until now.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you.
Yes.
The next, a próxima pergunta é de um estudante aqui da UTFPR, o Francisco, e ele faz uma pergunta associando a lógica do modelo comunista chinês, ou como é que esse modelo poderia servir como base para outros modelos. So, Francisco, in the UTFPR, it's another university here, questions about the difference between the way communist China invests in sport and how capitalist countries invest. Do you think China could be a good model for Brazil, considering that Brazil also has a peripheral position in global capitalism, like China had in the past?
I think it's a difficult question to answer, given that we did not study China. And also given that China is not very open in sharing information. So then I think it's also difficult to learn from these countries. In terms of structure, possibly yes. China is a way bigger in terms of population. But it's a very centralized system, and I think the values and the norms of the country are quite different from Brazil. So as we know, like for example, with the Beijing Games, that they obliged children not to go to school, but only to perform in gymnastics or in a sport because they wanted to win medal. And if that kid does not make it in the sport, it has no alternatives because they didn't go to school. Those are values that I think are quite different from the values that we are striving for in more industrialized Western thinking countries. So from that perspective, I would not think that China is the best country to compare with.
Yeah, thank you so much. A próxima questão vem do professor Fernando. Eu penso que deve ser o professor Fernando Starepravo, da Universidade Estadual de Maringá. It's about the pillar of the research and innovation, and how they impact in the, for example, in the success. Okay. in general, maybe. So next, if you have some example that the country that you research and could see the impact of the innovation and research.
Yeah, the country that has the best score on that pillar was Australia. If you look in Australia, there is a tradition already since it was created in 1981. That they have embedded scientists working within the Institute of Sport in Australia already over a long term. So it's a long-term tradition that they have there. So what these countries are doing, and other countries are copying, same in the UK, is that they have scientists collaborating with them, with the athletes, with the coaches, within the system, and they are embedded. Also, scientists are paid to create research or to help the athletes perform within different federations. So that makes a difference in the success of countries. Actually, I'm going to give an example. In Sydney, was it Sydney? Yeah. We performed not so well. No, I think it was in Athens. We performed not so well at the Olympic Games. We only won 3 medals. One of them was Tia Hellebold. She was a high jumper, and she won a gold medal. She won gold, and then Vlasic was the Ukraine high jumper that won silver. Well, the difference for her was that little bit scientific research. So at that time she had biomechanical analysis of all the details of her jumping that make that little difference of where she has to put her foot and in what angle she does what. I don't know all the details. It's that kind of sport science support that is needed for athletes and for coaches and more broadly. One point I want to add to that is that the best performing countries, they are trying not only to focus on the research of embedded scientists, but they try to be innovative. They try to do the most silly projects, doing things that other countries are not yet doing, but just to explore and to see what it might lead to, because they want to stay ahead of the other countries. So they also invest a lot of money in that.
Okay, thank you. Nós vamos para a última pergunta, já me avisaram aqui. Ok, obrigado. Mas é uma pergunta que cabe talvez no pilar da cultura e diz respeito à recuperação de alguns símbolos esportivos e coloca aqui a questão da elitização do desporto e até talvez da utilização de alguns símbolos como a camisa da seleção brasileira por algumas situações, enfim, mais polêmicas. This question is about the culture. Okay. The culture, the
culture, yes.
So, how can we recover sport symbols that have been waked by elitization of sports and the loss of population connection? Because I don't understand. Yeah, sorry. Because you have not problem, but a polemic in Brazil about the use of the Brazilian football shirt for one ex-president. So. It's about the recovery the symbol and the impact of the symbol to the proud of the people in the country. What do you think about that?
Okay. What is the question then?
Yeah, maybe the comment, not the question, or something like that.
So is the question, what is the role of culture?
Yeah, you can.
Because I think like Brazil is football is everything for Brazil, and so this is a typical example of a tradition and of a culture, and all children will be playing football. Even if they wouldn't have a ball, they would find another way to play football. Obviously that influences the success of countries, and it's true, that's not something we measure in SPLIS, but it's true that in some sports countries will perform simply because of the tradition they have in the sport. The Netherlands is a good example of that. They have a tradition in skating. There is no other country in the world that will win as many medals as the Netherlands does in skating. Well, there is also no other country where people would get mad when it's snowing and when you can skate from one city to another in the Netherlands. So those are cultural factors, and even with a large amount of money, we will never beat the Netherlands in skating because it's culturally embedded. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
and within SPLIS, it's a part we cannot measure. Of the 60%, the sport policy does not measure the 60%. Maybe it only measures 10, 15, 20%, who knows? Maybe 50%, I don't know. All we know is, even if though it would be a small part, it's the only part we can influence as policymakers. We can probably not influence the culture, but we can influence these policy factors. And that's why we focus on these.
Thank you so much. Nós chegamos ao fim dessa sessão. Eu gostaria de convidar duas pessoas aqui que eu acho que foram muito especiais durante esse período. I invite two people that I think that it's very special for you. So, Gabi and our
Piana.
Yeah, yes, Piana, yeah. Because it's not
Gustavo.
Yeah, Gustavo, yeah. So, please.
No.
Professor Veerle, or as we affectionately say, Vivi, thank you so much for being here with us. It's really an honor for all of us, the EPA, to have your accepting invitation, and certainly a privilege for every Brazilian sports policymaker and manager who had the opportunity to hear your insights today. Thank you. Welcome to the Brazil, the Paraná, and enjoy it. Thank you.